My girlfriend's parents arranged a marriage for us, despite us only being together for 2 weeks. I met my girlfriend Sarah at church, and I swear it was love at first sight. We quickly developed feelings for each other, and it wasn't long until she became my girlfriend. Everything was great. I saw her as potentially the love of my life. But then I met her parents, and everything went south. One of the first things her dad said to me was, "The wedding is set for 3 months' time. That should be adequate time for you to prepare to take our daughter's hand in marriage." I chuckled, thinking it was a joke, but he continued, "My wife and I always dreamed of our daughter belonging to a good man, and you are one. We are certain." Why wait? That's when I realized he wasn't joking. He and his wife had arranged a marriage for us, despite us only dating for less than 3 weeks. Sarah seemed very calm when he said this. Later that evening, I pulled Sarah aside to talk. I asked her if she knew anything about them wanting us to get married. She looked shocked and hesitated before telling me she didn't think they expected us to marry so quickly. She said they planned it without her knowledge. I asked if her parents did this with other guys she dated, and she responded, "Are you trying to accuse me of trapping you in a marriage? I told you I didn't know why they said that. Can we just leave it at that?" And that's exactly what I did. We went back into the living room with her parents and watched a movie until it was time for me to go home. Later that night, I kept thinking about how fast this was moving and knew I needed more help before making a decision. I decided to talk to my parents about it the next morning. I went to my dad first. I told him that Sarah's parents wanted me to marry her. He asked which one it was, and I told him, "The girl from church. The one you always carried an extra chair for." He laughed and said, "Yes," rolling my eyes. He went on to tell me that it was a little early for marriage, and that it would be rough, especially since we were young. Just as I was about to agree with him, my mom came in and asked what we were talking about. I caught her up to speed, and she told my dad that they got married right out of high school as well. Then he reminded her that they dated all through high school. Sarah and I had been dating for only 2 weeks. Eventually, they both concluded that I should break up with her to avoid the hassle of getting married too quickly. They said that her parents forcing us to get married without knowing who I was a red flag. I told them how much I liked her and how long I'd been waiting to date her, and they wanted me to blow it after only 2 weeks of dating. My dad's usual silly banter switched. He told me that if I chose to be with this girl, despite the friction at the beginning of the relationship, I would regret it. My mom reluctantly agreed and told me to make the right decision and break up with her. I told them I would think about it, but I had no intention of breaking up with her. I knew they wouldn't understand. I went upstairs to talk to Sarah on the phone. I still wanted to date her but wasn't ready for marriage yet. She picked up the phone and seemed happy. I asked her how her day was, and she told me it was great. She and her parents were looking online for wedding dresses. I felt a lump in my throat. I told her that was great and that I was glad she was happy. We continued talking about our day, and then I asked if it would be cool if I came over the next day. She said yes. I knew I had to tell her parents how I felt before they went too far. We said our goodbyes, and I began thinking of ways to convince her parents. I practiced in the bathroom mirror for what felt like hours. The next day, when I felt I had perfected my argument, I went over to Sarah's. Her parents greeted me at the door and told me to come in. I asked where Sarah was, and they told me she was upstairs and would be down shortly. My heart started beating faster as I asked them if I could speak to them while we waited for Sarah. Her dad said, "Sure, son. Hit me with your best shot." I started by saying how Sarah was a lovely girl and how much I enjoyed being with her. Then I told them that I felt it was too soon for marriage. In that instant, I saw her dad's face tighten. I continued speaking, telling them that I would love to continue dating their daughter with the hopes of marriage, but I couldn't get married at that moment. They asked if I planned to leave their daughter, and I said no, but they accused me even more. They said I just wanted her for her body, and that if I planned on being with her, marriage shouldn't be an issue. I felt the rage coming from every angle. They treated me like I had set their house on fire. They told me I would marry their daughter now, and that this was the end of the discussion. I tried to tell them again that I wasn't ready, and that they should possibly build a relationship with my parents first to see if that's a household they'd want to blend with, but they weren't hearing it. They were convinced that we were getting married. My blood was boiling, and I started seeing red. They were forcing me to marry a girl I had dated for 2 weeks. They weren't being logical in their decision, and were just obsessed with doing it their way. To avoid being disrespectful, I excused myself and went home. I texted Sarah that I was sorry I couldn't see her that day and would come back once I cooled off. She said she understood, and I asked if she could come over the next day because the last thing I wanted was to see her parents. She agreed. The next day, she arrived at my door with her big smile. I asked to speak with her in my room, and as we walked upstairs, she told me that her parents had told her about our conversation the previous day. I told her I wanted to ask her opinion on it, and she said she could see where they were coming from. She admitted they delivered it poorly, but the goal was still to get married. I paused for a moment and turned around to look at her. I couldn't believe what she was saying. I asked her if she felt comfortable marrying someone she'd only dated for 2 weeks, and she said it shouldn't matter since we both planned on marrying each other anyway. She tried to convince me of all the reasons why getting married wouldn't be a bad idea. She argued that it would make us more financially stable in the long run and that we'd have a forever companion in one another. She was serious. I asked her how long she had been thinking about this. That's when she told me she was thinking about it when she saw me at church and didn't want to scare me off. She said she and her parents would always notice how nice and caring I was to her at church and that she needed a husband like that. She had been planning on me while I waited for her to be my girlfriend. I said it would be wild to get married right now and tried to explain all the reasons I had presented to her parents, but her mind was made up. She was determined to be with me. I told her I couldn't do it anymore and ended the relationship. I could hear my dad's voice from the other day telling me I would regret being in this relationship, and I honestly did. She called me selfish and said her parents were right about me. She accused me of only wanting to play with her emotions, and I told her that wasn't the case. I wasn't ready for marriage and felt like I was being forced into it. She didn't care and stormed out of the house. Just then, my mom brought in some cookies she baked for us. I told her that Sarah and I were done, and she dropped the sheet of cookies on the ground in disbelief. I told her that she and Dad were right, and that we were moving too fast. I was so caught up in liking her that I overlooked a lot of things. I got a call from Sarah that night, and she asked if we were really done. I told her I would be if her parents forced us to get married so soon, and she cried on the phone. I felt bad and almost changed my mind to make her happy, but I had to stand firm. She would call or come over to my house the next few weeks to bring me some of my favorite treats or ask to hang out with me. I didn't want to tell her no because I really enjoyed her company. When she came over, we watched movies together and played board games. We'd have a lot of fun, but without fail, when it was almost time for her to go home, she would ask if I still wanted to remain just friends. She would remind me that we always had fun together and that we could do that forever if I wanted to. I would have to tell her no each time, and she would look sad and leave. Each time, I had to chase after her to make sure she was okay, but after a while, I realized it shouldn't be my concern since we weren't dating. That's when her parents started showing up at my house trying to talk to me and my parents. They would say that my parents raised a good son and that breaking up such a great couple was a mistake. They would try to bring peace offerings constantly. Sarah's mom knew that my family liked chocolate cake, and she would bring one over almost every week. Each time, it felt like she was trying to bribe us. Their last hope of me dating Sarah again was one afternoon when they showed up with Sarah and asked to talk to me. I told them yes and let them in. They said they would love for us to get back together and had seen Sarah sad since our breakup. They told me they would be okay with us casually dating as long as we both planned to get married to one another and wouldn't do anything intimate before that point. I looked at Sarah. She looked desperate for my answer. I really liked her as a person, and the opportunity was presented right in front of me. Best believe I took it. She hugged me tightly, and her parents looked displeased with how close we were but masked it with nervous smiles. We were back together again, and even though it had started rocky, I was excited that we were all on the same page. The next few months were the best of my life. Sarah and I did everything together. We applied for colleges, got food, and went to our favorite concerts together. I got us 2 tickets to her favorite indie band concert for her birthday a few weeks ago, and she was so happy. I loved making her smile. Her parents were happy with how I was treating her as well. They said they'd never seen her so happy. One day, while we were at her parents' house, her dad told me how glad he was that I was with their daughter and slipped a few sons into our conversation. He hadn't called me that since the first time Sarah and I dated. I didn't think much of it at first, so I let him call me that. The following day, Sarah and her mom were watching a show about women picking out wedding dresses. Her mom was saying how beautiful she would look in one. Then her mom went to the closet, pulled out her old wedding dress, and told Sarah to try it on. She looked stunning. The dress looked like it was made for her. They asked me what I thought about it, and I told her she was beautiful. A few weeks later, they started asking if I would be ready to pop the question soon, and that's when my bubble of delusion popped. I realized they were trying to make me marry her again, and I wasn't having it. I asked if the subliminals they had been showing were a ploy to get me to marry their daughter. They brought up the same argument from months ago if I planned on marrying her. The time shouldn't matter. I should have known they hadn't changed. They just wanted me to be with their daughter again, and I could see right through it. I told them I wouldn't be marrying their daughter now, and they were heated. They called me ungrateful and said I didn't deserve their daughter if she had to wait years to get married. We argued until I realized we were talking in circles, and I decided to speak to Sarah about it. She said the exact same thing she said months ago. I decided to break up with Sarah. It hurt more now than before, because I really wanted to spend my life with her, and over the past few months, we had built a great bond with each other, but I suppose life got in the way. Her parents didn't bother trying again to get me back, and although Sarah did, even attempting to seduce me with explicit photos on a few occasions, I never gave in.